Well, welcome to this short reflection, which is one of a series that we're offering for Holy Week in 2020, a time when we find ourselves in the most unexpected of circumstances. I hope that each of them, looking briefly at the lectionary reading from John's Gospel for the day, will help you discover something of God's presence as you journey through it. At the end of each, after a brief prayer, I invite you to simply spend some time in quiet reflection, using the words of a very simple song by Sam Hargreaves, Jesus, Lead Us to the Father.
6 days before the Passover, Jesus came to Bethany where Lazarus lived, whom Jesus had raised from the dead. Here a dinner was given in Jesus' honour. Martha served, while Lazarus was among those reclining at the table with him. Then Mary took about half a litre of pure nard, an expensive perfume. She poured it on Jesus' feet and wiped his feet with her hair. And the house was filled with the fragrance of the perfume. But one of his disciples, Judas Iscariot, who was later to betray him, objected. "Why wasn't this perfume sold and the money given to the poor? It was worth a year's wages." "Leave her alone," Jesus replied.
In some ways, this is quite a difficult and perhaps even confusing story. There are echoes of a similar event in a couple of other Gospels, and that might leave some of us wondering whether these are all different versions of the same thing, or whether something like this maybe happened more than once. I don't think we need to get too hung up on that. The simple truth is that the Gospel writer John, who was far closer in time to these events than we are, feels it's important for us to hear this story in Holy Week. Jesus is in Jerusalem and it's festival time. And he's making his way through the sideshows and religious gatherings that would inevitably have been part of that. He would have been with crowds of other religious pilgrims journeying through this commemoration of some of the most significant and definitive expressions of their history and their religion and their identity. And for me, a huge part of the impact of this event is the contrast that it portrays. The contrast between this catalogue of prescribed rituals and activities that are happening in Jerusalem and the actions of Mary in her home in Bethany. While everybody is busy doing Passover by the book and admiring the sights of the grand new temple, Mary is at home, breaking every social convention and etiquette, a woman wiping the feet of a rabbi with her hair, making him ritually unclean with her touch. Mary should have been hiding away, hiding behind the routines of busyness like her sister Martha, or if, as some think, she had something of a dubious reputation, perhaps just hiding away. But Mary doesn't hide away. She places herself centre stage, and it's the aroma of her perfume that fills the room. And not surprisingly, Mary attracts the criticism of Judas and no doubt many others by what she does. But perhaps for a few moments, we can put ourselves in her shoes. She expressed her love and devotion to Jesus. She worshipped her God, not by following the prescribed patterns of the Passover festival or observing the religious etiquette of keeping her distance. She wasn't very good at being religious, but she knew how to be real. Real about herself and real about her love for Jesus. And in her actions, I can't help hearing echoes of Jesus' words to the woman from Samaria that we read about in chapter 4 of John's Gospel. Then, in the middle of an attempted argument about whether Gerizim or Jerusalem made the most authentic temple, Jesus simply said, "Worship God in spirit and truth." So in spirit and truth, Mary broke all the rules, departed from routine, and expressed her devotion to Jesus in the only language she knew. You don't have to fit to be accepted by Jesus. You just have to be honest. And perhaps we too are struggling to know how to worship God in these strange circumstances that we now find ourselves in. We're forced to hide away from one another and live in isolation. We're terrified to touch a stranger in the street and denied the usual routines and habits that define this time of year. But we don't need a script to discover the presence and the love of Jesus. We don't need to keep our distance from him. We don't need to worry about what others might say. And we certainly don't need to be afraid of God's condemnation if we get it wrong. Mary shows us that. And Jesus stands up for her and faces down her critics. Jesus accepts her unorthodox actions and sees the love and devotion that lies at their heart. So this Holy Week, all you need is yourself. All you need to do is what you feel you want to do. All you need to speak is the truth. And though this world of social distancing and isolation and the fear of infection may be a strange and difficult one, Jesus can still be at its heart. Whatever festivals are or are not going on in the background, Mary found Jesus sitting at a meal table in her home. And Jesus accepted Mary when she reached out for him in the only way she knew. And all God asks of us, and all that God longs for us, is that we do the same. And so we pray, gracious God, help me to worship you in spirit and truth, in whatever way I find to offer my devotion to you.